The Prime Minister will inject $1.5 billion into revitalising Australian manufacturing, boosting large-scale production, developing new products and expanding the nation's access to global markets. Let's bring in my panel. For all their analysis, Sky News host of Across Australia, Peter Gleeson in Brisbane, Radio 2GB broadcaster, Sky News host Chris Smith in Sydney. Chris, what I reckon is really smart about this plan today is the PM's targeted particular sectors. He's not trying to say Australia will make everything, but he's focusing on what Australia can do well and where we can really get a competitive advantage. I think this is great news when we're coming out of this COVID recession to think that this is where we're headed.
Yeah, the timing's perfect. It's amazing, though, because we've been and witnessed so much money being spent during this pandemic, like we're talking $320 billion, that when you hear $1.5 billion, it almost sounds like pocket money. However, if you divide it into the 6 major areas that he's dedicated it to, we're talking about $250 million per sector. Is it enough? Probably not. But they're in a position to grab those sectors that actually can hum eventually in the medium to long term and support them even further. I think it's over time. I think everyone's talking about the fact that we need to bolster manufacturing again. I think the timing couldn't be better. And maybe it's a chance to show how good we are at things like medicine, science, etc. That we've been, I guess, punching above our weight for many, many decades. But this is a chance to really shine, I think.
Well, we also know too, at the start of the pandemic, there was so much that we couldn't get because we'd lost the manufacturing capability. It was manufactured overseas because it was cheaper. One of the issues we've always had, Gleeso, is that our energy, our wages have always been high, but our energy was always cheap and reliable. That's now changed, and we're a hard destination to manufacture in because the price of our energy is high and it's not so reliable anymore. And of course, our wages are high. Now, we're not going to change the way we pay our workers. But this is where the PM's canny in terms of the politics. He's gone down into the energy debate. If you want manufacturing, you've got to have energy. And of course, Labor doesn't just take coal. Labor now want to ban gas. Makes it very hard for Labor to talk about a manufacturing policy agenda if they've got this green dogma, infecting all of their policy making.
Oh, yes. Well, actually, I was just having a few technical issues there, Peter, but everything's good. Yeah, look, I think this is a winner. I really do. I think this, he's explained this perfectly today. He's gone down the path of making sure that we address some of the key reforms that are required as we get into this sort of post-COVID renaissance. And I think it's, I think it's a winner. I think it will sail from an electoral point of view. I think, we've seen the Business Council of Australia come out today and be very, very clear on it, Peter, saying that it is absolutely what we need right now. And I think it's all part of the building blocks. And we'll see next Tuesday in the federal budget, we'll see a whole raft of initiatives like this where reform is at the top of the agenda. I think personal tax cuts will again be top and centre of that particular reform process.
All right, let's stay with you. I don't want to lose you again. Queensland Sports Minister Mick de Brenni, a lot of pressure to resign. He overturned a whole range of recommendations, what I'm told, 35 times, to put projects into his own electorate and to look after his Labor mates. How is he still there?
Well, he's there because he's the thug-in-chief for the left faction of the Labor Party in Queensland. He's a former union official. He runs the left faction. Look, this is extraordinary, Peter. This guy should be joining the Moscow Circus. He's an absolute clown. But what's really occurred here is an absolute shame for about 14 sporting organisations in Queensland. They're the ones that the department insisted and recommended should receive some of these grants. They are, in fact, kicked to the curb by this bloke, and he then gave those particular grants to his mates in Labor electorates. It's worse than Bridget McKenzie. It's worse than Ros Kelly. And as I say, the real shame here, you know what else he did, Peter? He also made sure that 2 particular clubs in his electorate got $500,000 each. And if you look at the percentage in terms of who got what, the original recommendation was that 45% of LNP seats get money and 47% of Labor seats get money. By the time this bloke got his mitts on it, 68% of the funding went to Labor electorates and 28% to the Liberal Party. Pork barrelling, absolutely at its worst.
All right, well, let's stay with pork barrel. I'll come to you now, Chris. The PM was pretty surprised, he says, by a vote of ABC employees yesterday who elected to give themselves a pay rise in the middle of this recession. Let's have a listen.
There's 112 Commonwealth government agencies that elected to take the freeze, and it had to have had the freeze put in place. Commonwealth public servants are the same. Commonwealth politicians are the same. I mean, we've got other parts of the media industry and the private media industry who are taking big pay cuts, and so I was quite surprised that they took that view.
Well, the only ones getting an increase are public servants, Chris. In Victoria, about the only industries back at work are heavily unionised industries, and obviously the public servants who have been working all the way through, or at least being paid all the way through. Private sector, small business, they are on their knees. This is ridiculous because they're paying these bills.
There is absolutely no such thing as we're all in this together. That's one of the great lessons we have learnt from this pandemic. That is not the case whatsoever. I know late this afternoon, New South Wales public servants got a very, very small wage increase, but they got a wage increase in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of probably the toughest recession we've had in 50 to 75 years. They don't get it. The ABC are clearly out of whack with not only Australia, but also the mood of Australians. And as the Prime Minister pointed out there, they've not only embarrassed themselves in front, in the face of working class people who can't rely on the public service to keep their job and rely on longevity for their security. They actually rely on results, real results, but they've embarrassed themselves in the eyes of other public servants who made a very different decision and they decided to freeze their own wages. Well, the ABC decided not to, at least 80% of them, and they should be condemned for it.
Chris Smith, Peter Gleeson, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Peter.